I think Ms. Lanier is supposed to be here, but
She is. I did speak with her this morning.
there she is.
so-
So, Oh, no. All right. Good morning, everyone. Call the meeting here at 8:03. Welcome to the first Finance Committee of the new session here. Looks like we have a full, everyone's here. Any public for public comment? Nope, does not appear to be. All right, jump right into it. Action items. Julie?
Great. Good morning. The first action we have for you is our second budget amendment for the fiscal year. This is our largest budget amendment that we typically bring to you around this time. And I'd like to start first with our general operating fund, which includes our general programs, our grants, and our athletics program. A couple changes in our revenue that we're bringing to you. When you first adopted the budget last June, a part of the State School Aid Act include a provision for performance-based funding. It's known as Section 22J. At that time, all the indications from the state were that Grand Rapids was not eligible for that funding. And then the Department of Ed has done some rework, and we found out this fall that we actually were eligible for some of that funding based on our secondary score improvements, which is really great news for us. So that we're bringing to you in this amendment that increase of $725,000 to our revenue funding stream, which is great news. That is really the major adjustment on our general program side to our revenue. We have a couple other small adjustments. But on our grant side, we're reflecting several changes. We're bringing in the final year one and adding our year two for the educator effectiveness program that we're working through with Cambridge. We're recording our donations from Student Advancement Foundation for art, music. They also give us some money for calculators and the Believe to Become program. We're continuing our Meyer Good Schools grants and Power School. We have year two of Power School, and then there's several other minor adjustments in our local sources. In the state revenue category, we did receive an award increase for our school-based health centers, which are located currently at 3 of our comprehensive high schools, so we're reflecting that increase. As well, we're recording an additional Section 31A revenue to account for some positions that we needed to add in throughout this fall. And under our federal resources, we're reflecting a decrease in our IDEA allocation. We were decreased by a little under $400,000. We're reflecting a decrease in our 21st Century. That's our after-school loop program. We lost one of our cohorts, as you are aware. In addition to that, another cohort was greatly reduced in the amount of funding that we were receiving. So that reduction is about $870,000. We're recording our SIG carryover funds of $400,000. We were able to successfully receive a waiver for our Title I carryover. Title I has a limit of 15% carryover of unspent funds in any fiscal year. You're allowed to request a waiver once every 3 years if you have more than a 15% unspent balance. And due to the ending of that stimulus money and the encouragement by the Department of Ed to spend your stimulus and allow us to shift costs from our regular Title I to the stimulus last fiscal year, it caused us to go over that 15% carryover limit. So we applied for a waiver and received that, so that's what that increase is to our Title I. And then we've projected our Title II-A grant, which is a grant that is for professional development. We've projected our expenditures through the end of June, so there's a reduction in that. Any questions on the revenue side?
Good?
Julie, can you talk a little bit about the 22J funding? Is that typical for us? Did we always receive those funds?
No, that was new. That was
Okay.
new in the budget this year. And
Okay.
that was that performance-based. And we first weren't eligible to receive it all, the
Right.
preliminary information that came out for state, and we
Okay.
talked about it when we were in the budget development process last spring. And they did some reworking, and we're not even quite sure, because we can't get the information on how they even calculated our $725,000.
But you'll accept it.
But we'll take it. But it, we will continue to try to get that. It'd be nice to know.
Yeah, so that you can plan for it.
Yeah,
if you
how
know
did
the
we
formula.
qualify? What were the indicators that required us or allowed us to get this money? So
And then the PBIS budget, excuse me, were these dollars typically embedded in the budgets at each individual school, and then now they've been taken away from individual schools and put into one single pot, or?
So in flipping over to the expenditure side, we implemented the PBIS program, began implementing it last year with the superintendent, and what we didn't do as a system was when we
Budget
said we were going to implement it, budget for any costs that were associated with it. And, PBIS comes with their student incentives for that, and we didn't budget for that. And talking with the superintendent, it's not the right thing to do, to implement a program and, do to ourselves what, we don't like what the state does to us and consider it kind of a mandate and that's unfunded. So we've worked with the Student Reform Office and established a budget for that to help all of the schools.
So what was
Like that.
happening was each individual school was
They were looking for donations.
from different,
Their
just
com-
all over?
Their
Okay,
community partners, it was all over the board on
Okay.
how they were funding these incentives, so.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Someone had raised this, will Creston still qualify, or city, as it's moved to Creston Building, will that still be a school-based clinic? Or will that have to move to Central, or?
That's a great question. We're looking at that right now in conversations with the state to see what can we do for next year and future years for those health centers. So we will report back to that.
Can I just add something that just recently? Just add another piece of information. A grant application was just available a couple days ago, and we chose not to go for it, for Central High School to build a health clinic for $275,000. And the reason is it's just not enough time. We need to look at the layout at Central and find out if in fact we can still use Creston as a health base, because of how we funded that. But we didn't want to commit to a grant and then not have enough space to build a health clinic. So we're going to go after the grant next year if in fact we have enough space.
Any other questions? You want to approve the first one first? You got to do two of these, right? Special revenue and,
Yeah, there's a special
I'd
revenue and
entertain a
we
motion.
typically do it as one, but we can certainly do it separate if you prefer.
Up to you. Yeah, let's do it separate. There's two resolutions in there, so. Is there a motion to approve the,
Motion to approve budget amendment 2.
Second.
your support? Support. All right. All right, go ahead.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Motion carries 4-0. All right. Special revenue?
Special revenue fund. We have a few changes to our special revenue fund. And how we typically show it to you is we break out center programs. We have several changes in the center programs. There's a reduction in the tuition revenue. Center programs is a self-balancing fund, if you will, so if there are costs that are above the revenue that is coming in, then we bill the districts who have students who are participating in each of the center program schools. So due to a reduction in our costs that we're projecting for this fiscal year, there's a need to reduce the amount of tuition revenue that we'll be billing out to the districts, including ourselves. That's probably the biggest chunk in our center programs change, the reduction in our expenditures due to various reasons such as there have been a few position reductions because of student needs. There have been a few position adds because of student needs. And we have, as we continually try to fine-tune our practices in the business office to ensure that costs are being allocated appropriately to all the funds, we have taken a step, and working with Mrs. Cribbs and our office have taken a step to try to more accurately reflect benefit costs to our other funds. And so that is a part of the reason why you're seeing a reduction in expense to the center programs. In our other special revenue fund, the biggest one is our food and nutrition program, and we are bringing two things to you for that program. We're reflecting an increase in our federal revenue based on current level of revenue that we're receiving, the reimbursement amount from the federal government. As well, we are pulling out, we had originally planned some renovations for this fiscal year, and in the light of the transformation plan, we're bringing these down quite a bit. And then as we work with Mr. Klomparents and his team to identify needs such as what do we need to do for stocking, we may in a final amendment bring that back up for you to approve.
Any questions?
I have one, and I'm not even exactly sure how to frame it. While in D.C., Senator Stabenow mentioned something about funding was cut during this last effort to work on the budget, the federal budget, and somehow, some way, it impacted something with school lunches. And I don't know, and she promised to fix it, but I don't know exactly what it is that she's fixing. Do you know? Have you heard?
I'm not sure we've experienced that, and I haven't heard that
Okay. Okay.
myself, so.
I knew I hadn't heard it at the local level, so maybe it hasn't impacted us yet. So, okay.
But I'm gonna make a note and look into that to see
Yeah.
if Mr. Baumgartner has heard anything. He hasn't shared anything with me, so I'm not sure it's come down this far and impacted Grand Rapids.
Okay, thanks.
Is there a motion to approve the special revenue budget amendment?
Motion to approve the special revenue fund budget amendment 2. Support.
All right.
Ms. Lanier?
Yes.
Dr. Rand?
Yes.
Mr. LeGrand?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Donations.
Donations, we have a few donations for you to review this morning. The first is a donation from Jim and Nancy Ayers, and I'm gonna apologize if I've mispronounced their last name. They have a donation in the amount of $3,000, and it is to support supplemental literature for Lincoln School and Lincoln Developmental School. And this literature will be used to support a curriculum that both of those schools have implemented called the Unique Learning System. We also have a donation in the amount of $44,000 from the Student Advancement Foundation. These are funds to support our art and music supplies. They have done this for several years now. We have a donation from the Michigan Department of Education to support our Teacher of the Year, Bobby Jo Kenyon. They are donating a smart board. It will be considered district equipment. So if for some strange reason Bobby Jo Kenyon never leaves, we would retain the equipment with us. And then I have two donations related to the Partners in School Innovations work. That was a part of our transformation plan, if you recall that. That was part of our recommitment. They are working with Burton Buchanan, Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership, and Southwest Community Campus Elementary Schools. We have a donation from the DeVos Family Foundation in the amount of $150,000, and a donation from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation in the amount of $800,000.
Any questions about the donations? Yep. Motion to approve the donations for the full board review.
Motion to approve the donations for the full board.
Support.
Yes.
Dr. Randall?
Yes.
Mr. LeGrand?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Right. Insurance policy holder resolution.
Yes, we have before you a resolution for the district to declare itself a policyholder for employee health care insurance benefit programs. The need for this resolution arises out of one of our revenue funding streams, the best practice incentive payment, which we are eligible to receive $52 per pupil. There's currently, in our budget, we had planned on that. There are 8 requirements, and in order to receive this payment, we have to meet 7 of the 8. And I had emailed the chart, I apologize, I should have probably put this in the packet, but I emailed the chart the other night, so I hope you had an opportunity to review that. With moving this resolution forward and approval of a resolution, we will then meet the 7 of the 8 criteria. And then the next steps upon approval would be, we'll finalize all of our criteria. There will be another resolution that the board will have to approve that will show which of the 8 criteria that we do meet and to qualify for this revenue stream, and then we will forward that on to the Michigan Department of Ed. And then when they receive it, is when we'll actually begin receiving the funds via our state aid payments on a monthly basis.
Yes, absolutely.
So which budget will we receive the funds for? Is it retro or is it the future budget?
Nope, it would be for this current year.
Okay, but from the moment that we submit to the state, or will it retro back to the beginning of this current year's budget?
They will take whatever the calculation is, and we have over $1 million budgeted for this based on our pupil count. They will take what they owe us and divide it out amongst the payments, number of payments that are left in the fiscal year. So it'll all be reflected in this current fiscal year.
But I'm asking, are they calculating it based on, for the entire year, or is it just, so if it's
No,
by
it's based on the-
pupil, and I know the change, we have fluctuation in how many pupils we have throughout the year, so I guess maybe that's a better question.
Yeah, it will be based on our fall count,
Okay.
if that's what you, okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Sorry.
No, sorry, I didn't, yeah, thanks.
Any other questions?
So, a couple questions. First of all, I get that this is a dance we have to do, and we have a narrative in the beginning that declares that this has got some actual benefits, other than doing what the state's telling us we have to do to get money. Is there any discernible benefit to this change?
To this discernible benefit for having this resolution declaring ourselves other than the incentive payment?
Right, I mean, they say it's a cost containment measure. What does that, I mean, is there any, what is this, if this is the state's articulated best practice, it's better than what and why? Do you have any idea?
I'm not sure why the state would have picked, don't know what's in the minds of the legislators to pick what are the 8 criteria to get this incentive. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, you are. So there is, I mean, I'm seeing a pretty thin justification for doing this, other than the state's telling us to do this. Then I guess my next question is, we can certainly change this in the future if we want to, right?
I would assume so.
Yeah.
There's nothing binding us to having this policy,
This
to
isn't-
undeclaring ourselves the policyholder.
There's no term in here, so I guess that's worth pointing out.
Right.
Okay.
There was a conversation over a year ago about this resolution, and the thought, and I have my own biases about healthcare, et cetera, but, and the insurance, but the thought is, if the district is the policyholder, then the the insurance companies make changes and are more receptive and more responsive than if they're the policyholder. And so there was actually significant cost reduction by switching and becoming the policyholder, not only the $52. And it was a fairly convincing argument when it took place over, well, it was
This is the
probably
second year that it's
August.
been a part of their
Yes,
incentive.
Yeah.
Yep.
I believe it was August of 11 that we had this initial discussion.
So, great, so if there are some cost savings, who would be tracking to see whether there's any evidence that this does in fact benefit the district?
Well, we would work with our two insurance carriers that we have for our employee groups to see, and
It benefited not
It's-
only the employee, us, the employer, but the employees.
Okay.
So there was some cost reduction for
mean-
them as well.
Yeah, I'd like to see some kind of follow-up analysis on that.
Absolutely. Okay.
If and when we get some data.
sure.
I have a question. Knowing that there's 8 things, we've met a majority of them, and the one we can't meet regarding number 8, I believe it is, the physical education requirements from the state. Can you give a little insight as to why we cannot meet those requirements, or what, is there,
The state board policy on physical education that we would have to comply with indicates that we would have to offer 150 minutes per week at the elementary level for PE instruction. Currently, we offer 48 minutes per week. As a rough estimate, that would be an increase of about 30 teachers that we would need to do to increase that time. And currently, we aren't providing 50 hours of health education in grade levels pre-K through 12. To get that implemented for this year, to be able to do that.
To be able to do what, I'm sorry?
To provide 50 hours of health education in grade levels pre-K through 12.
You mean we're trying to get closer, and that counts as help, I'm sorry, that counts towards this minute
No,
number you said?
no, that's the one, Mr. O'Connor was asking why we could not meet the state board policy for physical education or health education.
Oh, it's
That was
or.
one of the 8 requirements that we could meet in order to receive this incentive
So it's
payment.
physical education or health education?
Yeah, it was either or of those two based on the state policy.
So you're
state board
saying
policy.
we're getting closer to making that achievable over time, but we're not gonna be able to make it this year?
Well, we couldn't make it this year. You know, we could look at, that's a direction that you want to give to the superintendent. But adding 150 minute, or having elementary PE be at 150 minutes per week would require an additional 30 teachers approximately for the system. Or if we wanted to go down the road of health education in pre-K-12, which is probably a really good thing for our students, we would have to look to see how can we start to embed that into our curriculum and our daily instruction.
is there any other negative ramifications for not providing something that the state's recommending? Meaning, they're recommending, obviously, the 150 hours of physical education is something that the state is recommending as appropriate curriculum for students. Are there any other negative ramifications for GRPS other than not obtaining the $52 in best practices money for not complying with or not having 150 hours of physical education?
Obesity?
Sure, if you want to look at that, we'd have to,
I'm just asking.
yeah.
I don't
I
know.
mean, I don't see anything other than the cost that's associated with it, being the finance person.
Any other questions?
Nope.
A motion,
So moved.
support,
Support.
please call the roll.
Ms. Lanier?
Yes.
Dr. Randalls?
Yes?
Mr. LeGrand?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, grant application.
All right. I have before you a grant application. As you're aware, we have the Challenge Scholars Program that's associated with Harrison Park, Westwood, and Union High School through the Grand Rapids Community Foundation. We are requesting your approval to reapply for $400,000 for the 2013-2014 school year. They provided a brief description of what that project does. Supports core academics as well as promoting college awareness and knowledge for our students, engages families in their child's educational journey, and it also aims to help reduce student absenteeism.
Any questions?
No.
Has there been any talk about the expansion of the Challenge Scholarship with the Community Foundation?
We're currently having those conversations. The superintendent has been having those conversations with the Community Foundation.
Excellent. Is there a motion to approve this grant application?
So moved.
Support?
Support.
All right, call the roll.
Ms. Lanier?
Yes.
Dr. Randall?
Yes.
Mr. LeGrand?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Reports and updates?
Actually, can I hang on to grant application for one more?
Yes.
Because it isn't in your packet, but I was just made aware, and the timing is such that we would not be able to bring this grant application to finance before we would need to submit this information to the state. The state released a new set of cohorts for that 21st century, or our after-school grant programs. The information is due to the state about the third week in February, so it would be before our next finance committee. I would like to request your permission to apply for additional cohorts so that our goal is to make sure that all of our schools have the ability to offer this after-school program through this 21st century federal funding.
So it'll be basically a restoration of our loop.
Exactly,
Right.
yep.
Just as a matter of procedure then, if it doesn't come in front of us, I think we'd like it to not be on the consent calendar, so it'd be an individual agenda item for the board as a whole.
Okay,
We haven't actually approved it.
okay.
Agree with that. All right.
All right, reports and updates. We have before you our December financial statements. Not a whole lot to report. On here, the budget that's reflected on these financial statements is not the second budget amendment. It is just through Budget Amendment 1. From our perspective, we're not seeing any big fluctuations or any red flags alarming us to any potential problems for our current fiscal year. Entertain any questions that you may have about that.
Any questions regarding the financial statements? All right, purchasing agenda?
Purchasing agenda, we just have two items on the purchasing agenda. The first is the fees that are related to the International Baccalaureate exams for city high school students, as well an increase to our IFL support for our SIG schools in the area of social studies.
Any questions regarding purchasing?
Yeah, I do have, about the IFL art, so this is sort of dwindling down. There was some discussion that we were gonna be moving away from IFL, or,
Yeah, the work here is doing is to help put some things in place that we'll be able to continue on. It's not a one-time and done type thing. They're putting some learning and other type of measures in place so that they could be ongoing for future years, that we can sustain them in our social studies curriculum.
and then my other question is, do we approve at some point, or is there a line item for the AP exams also? I mean, just to have a feel for the IB program costs money for their exams, but then also the AP, what, those.
Yep. As soon as I know how much those AP exams are gonna cost across the system, then I'm sure it's gonna be enough that it'll trigger, that will come through a purchasing agenda requiring your approval as well.
When we do the AP thing, cost, can you actually document for us how many of those tests were actually sat for? Because I know we purchased them by the block.
Okay.
I want to know how many were utilized, and ideally, how many were utilized by people who took an actual AP course. Because I know that in the past, they've been sort of generally offered as this surplus that could be consumed by anyone. I know my son took, I think, 4 AP exams for courses he didn't take because there were jurisdiction, so I think it's somewhere we might tighten up and save some money.
Okay, all right, absolutely.
All right.
All right,
Warm Safe Dry update?
reports and updates, I'm gonna turn over to Mr. Calpern. Warm, safe, and dry.
In your packet is the Warm Safe Dry update. I'll go through it probably in a little more detail because we've added what we're currently working on, so there's some changes. But from a history standpoint, the East Leonard, Ottawa, Fountain, and Congress projects are complete, and the numbers that are reflected in there are final, so those will start to drop off. And the bottom line with the summary sheet shows that we've been able to operate very close to our projected budget. Brookside and Frost roofs, the majority of the work is done. There's some punch list and paperwork to clean up before we can final those out. The new items on the list are the Creston Energy Management System controls and heating equipment, which is a heat exchanger. Those we will work on later in the summer and into the fall. We'll try and get the heat exchanger done more in the summertime. That is a behind-the-scenes project. No one will see the difference, other than they'll feel the difference, because we will actually be able to regulate heating much better. We'll be able to shut off areas. It is our intent, as we move City High in there, that we will close off the third floor, so we don't have to clean it, we don't have to heat it, we don't have to keep the lights on, and they can grow into it over time. So that's what that project is. Stocking, well, it says refurbishing, there's quite a bit more to that to get stocking ready to open again. We have to, the kitchen is non-existent, so we're going to reinstall a kitchen and update like we would do a normal kitchen cafeteria update. We have to put an elevator in. We are looking at completely remodeling the restrooms to be current with ADA. The classroom upgrades would be more cosmetic. Some things we can salvage. The woodwork is in terrific shape, so we're looking at more cosmetic in the rooms and making sure we have the basic technology package for an elementary school. And then as an aside, we are looking at what we would like to do if we're really struggling with the budget right now, but we would like to move the office to the media center location and relocate the media center, and that would allow us to use the front vestibule and have a secure entry through the vestibule into the office. Well, right now, the office is the next block down the hall, and it's really hard to secure, even when you buzz them in and out without someone getting up to walk and see who's there. It makes it very difficult. So that's on our list. We're trying to work within the budget as best we can, and I'll keep you updated as we move on with that. We've had some very good meetings with both the architect, C2AE, and the construction manager, OAK. We've started and we're well underway. The group listed as multiple, we put those together just contractually, they'll be separate, but we put them under one architect and CM to do those projects together. The walls at Sherwood are to divide up the pods that are there that aren't very functional. GR Ford, the restrooms are on the ground floor to convert that middle school so the ground floor can have early L. So those are in the 6 classrooms on the ground floor. Central refurbishing, again, that's a name placeholder, but it is to convert and get Central ready for the centers of innovation. Some of them are very specific, for example, where GRPS will come in, like the robotics, where the Academy of Design and Construction will come in. They have some special needs as far as how we're going to fit them in, and some of the other things are more classroom things, just general classroom updates. We want to make it look fresh for them. And of course, we'll also move the Ottawa Business School, the lounge in. We are working through the identification of all the classrooms. We know we have space. Now it's pinning them down and making sure that the classroom fits the class, that we don't try and squeeze 30 students into a classroom that can only fit 20. Because if you're aware, some of the old buildings have many different size rooms. We're working through all that with the various principals and executive directors.
Anything with the stairs at Central?
The front stairs or the side stairs?
Both.
The side stairs, if we have budget, we're looking at them. And keep in mind, if we can't do it this year, we can keep it on the list for future years.
What's the issue with the stairs?
The side stairs are wooden stairs, and they are original, and some of them are not the most stable. The front stairs are the marble, and depending on who you talk to, some people love and some people hate the dips in the marble.
But that you can handle, the other is.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And so that's what we're working on. You can see the budgets that we've set for the projects that are underway. We are trying to work within the constraints of sinking fund rules, which can get kind of goofy sometimes. So we're monitoring all that. We will go through our audit this summer to make sure we're in compliance. And that's where we are, and take any other questions you might have.
Monica, did you have something?
Oh, yeah, what's a elementary technology package? Well, I mean, are you gonna have it sort of wired for broadband or getting ready for Wi-Fi, or just wondering what a basic?
The building will be wireless, so then we have the option of moving the laptop into any room. And then each room will have the standard Elmo cart and projector screen, which gives the teacher the option of using their laptop or the Elmo for showing in color, anything on the table live, they can write on it. But it's that is our standard technology package.
A couple questions. First of all, and we'll get into this, I think, maybe under the sustainability policies later, but maybe we won't. I'm about to have to leave. When you look at buildings where there are major changes, is there a protocol in place for looking at energy efficiency right now? Do we have any outside agencies with expertise that look at that? I'm thinking, I mean, closing off the third floor of Creston's a great idea, for example, but there may be some additional energy savings there that an outside audit might make us aware of. Or do we have any procedure for dealing with those kinds of questions?
Yes, we have, it's broader than energy. We call it our energy office. We have 2 staff members that are specific, that look at energy. They maintain our energy programs as far as buying energy in bulk, and they also oversee our heating and ventilating and other energy-consuming equipment as far as setting standards for what we should be purchasing, how we should be looking at energy-efficient equipment, monitoring what's working for us and what isn't. So they keep a standard. We put that in as a criteria whenever we hire a architectural or construction consultant, that energy efficiency is part of the equation as we look at equipment. So we have had several audits in the past. The last one was done through MSBO and is focused specifically on middle schools.
I guess if we're moving on stocking here and we're moving on major changes on Creston, I'm talking about detail stuff, like do you need to weather strip doors? I mean, I understand if you buy a furnace, you look at the energy consumption, kind of like you do if you buy a fridge, but I'm talking about a more comprehensive energy audit. Is that something we could perhaps do on these buildings before we, as we move more in construction?
On stocking, we are replacing doors, the exterior doors, as part of the project, so they will be put in and fully sealed as part of our standard. We don't have the funding to replace the windows. And we can't seal the windows because of the ventilation requirements in the building for that. The ability to open windows falls under the fresh air requirement. So yes, we can look at that, but there are some limitations of what we can and can't do. And you're absolutely right. Some of the windows in the older buildings are pretty drafty.
Okay, thanks.
And a clarification point, do we sort of, and we've done 5 recently, renovations that qualified for LEED certification. Is that always sort of our standard that we go for in terms of replacement and evaluation of needs? I mean, because I would imagine that there is, yes, a minimum fresh air requirement and air exchange, but then, you know, the paint, are we doing low VOC? Are we, you know, taking care of environments in terms of a different level?
With a new building, we would certainly set LEED as a standard, or LEED or a combination of LEED and Energy Star. There are some other programs that maybe even have better energy benefits than LEED. In a retrofit like this, and we are not completely retrofitting the building, we are doing what we need to do to get it open for school and meet the ADA and safety requirements for the building. So we will incorporate on any project as many energy efficient or energy positive materials as possible. That can't say we will always do it in every spot, but it is a goal that we work to.
And in terms of air quality, carpets or flooring or wall coverings or these, those are, that is taken into consideration as well.
When we write our carpet, our standards for those, yes.
Are to a higher standard than what is recommended by federal policies.
I wouldn't say all the time, because it starts to get into cost, and we try and balance the benefits with whatever excess cost might be there. But it is a goal that we look at all the time.
Any other questions? If we could, can we move sustainability policies up ahead of the budget calendar? Mr. LeGrand has to leave, and I know he would like to talk about this, so. I'll let Dr. Randall's kind of lead on this. She was very interested in talking about the district's sustainability policies, if we have any, what we may be able to do. I think this sort of ties back into the conversation we were just having regarding some of the warm, safe, dry dollars being used to promote energy efficiency, sustainability, environment, et cetera.
I think, and I have some stuff that I've been looking at in terms of what various states are doing. And, and it was interesting because not even California is leading the path in this, but many other states, even Ohio, Pennsylvania, are really sort of pushing the limits. Of course, they have state support, and I think that this sort of dovetails a bit into legislative platform issues in terms of being burdened with 100-year-old buildings and attempting to renovate and retrofit and the expenses. But it's a disparities issue. You know, if we can't renovate a building to a quality and a high level where, you know, the carpet reeks, it gives a kid a headache, it triggers asthma, that's problematic. And so just looking at, and this is not a criticism, this is a bigger picture of we need to make sure that we're loud and clear that a child's health is critical, and if they're not healthy, they're not going to be able to learn to their full capacity. And so taking it from that perspective, that's where I wanted to have these conversations and other people also, because I think it's very important that we always do strive for, I'm not saying we have to go for gold LEED standards all the time, but we have been able to show that we are a leader in renovations and doing a good job. And it's not just making it a pretty environment that you know, people enjoy and want to be in, but I think that that's a really important issue. And competing locally, and other districts are doing renovations that are looking good and are healthy and don't trigger an asthma attack or a migraine or abdominal pain, then we're going to be serving students well. I think also this issue of warm, safe, and dry dollars, we have had some chance, and I don't know, we committed to the voters when we were asking for this bond to be passed that we would keep an eye on how did our investments pay off. And so I think that there is some capacity built in already that we're looking at this. How have we changed energy usage in Congress over time, something like that. And there was a commitment to make sure that that was going to happen. And so looking at how we save the money and then reinvesting in other sustainability projects with some sort of money, not necessarily from that kitty, because I'm sure there's all sorts of rules about worm safe and dry dollars, but this sense of you've decreased energy use from that savings of energy use at Congress, how can you reinvest that locally there? Or how can we impact that energy use and then distribute that into weather stripping? Ford probably doesn't need it because it was recently redone, but, you know, another building. So I think just looking at trying to really be a leader is an important issue. Else wanna?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're talking about sustainability, we're probably talking about at least three different categories. One, as Dr. Randall's pointed out, is the health component, which is certainly significant. The other is the full question of sustainability in life cycle of products and those kinds of questions. And those are things that, you know, we're a big enough district, we should be asking those questions and looking at them. I think that my suggestion would be that we form an ad hoc subcommittee, which is reports to the Finance Committee, which looks at building some policy for this and some report out on all of these criteria on, I mean, right now, if we say, well, we try to do some of this and we don't try to do others, do this other places, that's sort of an ad hoc, it's a little mushy. If we can tighten this up and have some criteria and have some analysis before and after projects on cost-benefit analysis, on strategies used, I would think that committee would also then have the ability to pull in potentially outside expertise. WEMIAC, for example, is very involved in this, and I would bet would be eager to get involved in some deep analysis of sustainability in the schools. I also, so the health is one thing, the sustainability is another, and the third is energy, and that's a big component. I think that there are at least three things to think about. One is, going forward, the city's been very clear for some time about its commitment to renewable energy. I think that ultimately that's something that our schools ought to be thinking about, whether we're purchasing renewable energy, whether we're making a commitment to that as a system. That's probably down the road, but immediately we can be talking about energy use, energy efficiency. And I think that there are at least a couple, I mean, there are a lot of innovative ideas out there. One is that something that a lot of institutions have been doing. I know Calvin College is doing it. It's essentially, the concept is sort of a sinking fund. What they do is they allocate an initial amount of money. That amount of money can be spent on an energy savings project. The savings are quantified, and the savings then are rolled back in to renew that fund, which can then fund more energy efficiency projects system-wide. So if you save $100,000 a year on energy at stocking, you can then use that $100,000 saving. It gets earmarked, put back into an energy efficiency fund, which can then fund future projects. So you've got a rolling source of funding, which also then makes very clear to the public how much money you're saving, where you're saving it, why it was a good idea to do. A lot of energy efficiency things have return on investments of anywhere between 20 and 40% a year. You can make a lot of money often on energy saving items. So they often do far better than market returns, far better than bond returns, putting our money other places. So I would like that group and this group to ultimately think about essentially some seed money for an efficiency fund, which could then be monitored and renewed. And then the final thing that's worth thinking about, I talked to the business department at the University of Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, they have, and unfortunately we may not have this resource here, I'm going to have to look into it more, but there's their business school is named after a man whose business is to go to major institutions, offer to take over their energy bill payments, and take a cut of the savings that he gets them. He took over the University of Oklahoma's energy payments last year and saved them $1 million. That's just one campus. So I think that, pardon?
They do it in districts too, the ISD, they do it here in Grand Rapids.
Right, so, and I don't think, we don't have an independent contractor on that yet, but that, I think that there are that's something that committee can explore. I think there's lots of interesting stuff we can do, but I think it's important enough to make a commitment on it that we probably ought to have a standing committee. And we also ideally ought to get some other community members involved in that ad hoc committee. I shouldn't have said standing, I meant ad hoc. But maybe get some other community members who are interested in this. Grand Rapids has had this kind of a committee the city has for a long time. It's involved community members and not just commissioners and not just the mayor. I mean, I'm still on the energy group at the city.
I think the fourth piece in that, just to sort of, well, you were talking about three things. That fourth is education, that kids actually will learn about, okay, this is actually implementable at my home. Even if I'm renting, you know, you can do a few things to make sure your air quality is improved. And I think that that makes a big difference, that these aren't just big institutions or composting is cute or recycling your papers is nice, but these do have an impact, and these are educational moments for children as well.
Well, do you have any questions?
Well,
Toss in?
I actually, perhaps I missed something. I know I've been gone a little bit, but it seems like I didn't hear the response to the question in terms of what it is that we're already doing as it relates to, I mean, if you mentioned earlier that we have 2 staff people whose, you know, primary responsibility is to look at, you know, our buildings and the energy efficiency of them all, I guess before I'm committed to anything else, I'd like to kind of know what it is that we're already doing so that we can know if it's necessary to do I mean, we could be doing everything that's been suggested here already, but I don't know that because I haven't heard anything and perhaps I missed
Well,
that.
I think that's why this is just
Okay.
a discussion item to see
Okay.
where we stand as
Yeah.
education for the board, to see if there's something we need to do more, we would like to do more.
Okay,
But this was just a discussion item for the
okay.
day too.
Well, the suggestions came before the response, so
Right.
that's why I was like, okay, did I miss, did we already receive the response? And, okay,
Just to
so,
give you the simple answer to that.
sure,
The two-stepper is part of their responsibility. It's not their entire responsibilities to monitor temperatures in the building, to make sure they're within our expected ranges, that we're functioning properly, to adjust the temperatures accordingly. They also look into what equipment we should buy that affects our energy usage. And part of their program is to make sure we we get the best cost when we buy energy, and we essentially buy it in bulk or at wholesale rates. That's the simple answer. We have looked at energy efficiency. It's much easier to do in a new building than a retrofit.
sure.
We have had a number of vendors come in to talk to us about taking over and saving us energy money. We've never hired anybody because there are drawbacks to those on how our buildings function and what temperatures they're kept at and how our users are treated and have access to those.
So if they do it, then they have more control over those
They
things?
have total control.
Okay, I see, okay,
And one, you know, probably the hardest one to deal with, at 3 o'clock, every building went to 50 degrees. It didn't matter if there was a teacher's group, a parent group, a basketball game, they played in 50 degrees. Well, is that an acceptable standard for us? And at that point, we did not feel that was a good thing for the uses of our building, that the cost benefit did not outweigh the impact
Sure.
on our users. So we've looked at those. Everybody does it a little differently, but we need to look at the pluses and minuses.
sure, okay.
And any of those, we would bring back to this committee with a report.
Anything else you want to toss in?
No, I think that,
So an inventory maybe of what it is we're already doing, maybe that'll help?
Yeah, and I know Dr. Randall's and I both looked through the policy. I mean, we don't have there's nothing that, sets the expectation from the
To make
board
sure we're doing
that
that.
says, we want to work on sustainability, we appreciate sustainability, we want to strive for sustainability.
Sure.
And whether or not that's a necessary policy or something that this body would like to
Sure,
discuss. Our group doesn't have the ability to set establish a committee, but I think a discussion with our president and the superintendent possibly, see if that's something that they would consider entertaining.
And-
Maybe a discussion for after this meeting. I believe our board president is in the audience here to have heard this discussion, so.
I think an inventory would be good. We can identify everything. When we talk about lead, that's very broad. It doesn't get into all the aspects of water conservation and, light conservation and all those things. So we could identify specifically what we've done.
Yeah,
Well,
and
I
then
was
kind of talk
looking,
the
because
next
I was
steps,
trying to
yeah.
educate myself in terms of what is LEED certification for schools and the silver level. They do take into account, and it may have helped us in some of our certification is density, land use density, and also air quality, water conservation, light. So there was quite a bit that, it was extremely comprehensive. Actually, I have a lot of information. I'll just send it to everyone. I was trying to pick out the important points of a 90-page report that was getting tedious, and so I included footnotes and things like that, but, so I'll just send it all out.
All right, and then last item on the agenda for the day is the budget calendar.
We have 2 items on the agenda still, but,
Go ahead.
so the budget calendar just went to,
Financial
The
calendar.
last item.
yeah, the
On
very last
Committee
second
meeting,
page,
yeah.
right?
kind of gonna look at both January and February. We're in the middle of student projections. We have taken a first pass internally and at the direction of the superintendent have also contracted services through a third party to develop projections as well, so that we can ensure.
Is that first time?
It's the first time that we have done that. We know our projections are pretty good, but it'll be nice to see an external third party and to see what they come up with. So we're in the middle of doing that. The governor is scheduled to release the executive budget for the 2013-14 school year on February 7th. So we're anxiously awaiting what that will look like. Once we receive that information, we'll be able to dissect that data and then start to project out what we think we will look like for next school year. And then we also need to look at beginning negotiations with several of our other employee groups. Our other contracts are expiring this June. So we'll begin to form those teams with the superintendent and connect with those employee groups.
The January class has 2012 on it?
You're right. Thank you. You are the first person to notice that after all these months, including myself, so, thank you.
Any other questions about budget calendar? All right. And then last item is the finance committee meeting calendar.
Yeah, so I think we talked about having the meetings on the fourth Monday. My computer's not even warmed up. But our problem we'll run into is in the month of May. That fourth Monday is Memorial Day. Typically, what we have done, we've had the fourth Monday of the month reserved for finance committees for several years now. What we've typically done in the month of May is we've just shifted that up to the third Monday of the month. So, just looking for
It's fine.
your suggestions and if that would be acceptable to you.
December is typically a problem with the fourth Monday.
Yeah. And then, so if we could move the May's meeting to the third Monday, and then the same thing would really fall for December as well.
Fine by me?
Okay, all right, so then we'll get that information out to staff.
Anything else, anyone? All right. Meeting's adjourned.